Hi,
Right.
everyone. Yes, it's 11:30 in Australia and it's 5:30 on the West Coast and 8:30 on the East Coast and in between it's something
7:30 here
else.
in the middle of the
I'm turning
country.
my camera
Oh,
off.
it's 10:30. It's 10:30. Boy, it's early there. All right. You ready to go?
I think so.
I'm gonna hit
Can
I'm
I
gonna hit
just
record.
do a little promo here for our next webinars before we get into this week? Um, just want to mention that we have 5 webinars lined up for May and June, and anyone who's on the phone and anyone who's signed up for this particular series about the 5 existential questions can attend one of those webinars for free. So we're going to send you an email, and so you can email us back and tell us which one you want. But just very briefly, here's what they are. The first one is called Inclusivity, and it's being taught by Sharif Abdullah, the founder of the Common Way Institute for Societal Transformation. And he's really been working on how to move the conversation beyond polarizing issues and hot button issues and promote societal spiritual awakening. So that's that summary. The next one is called Subversive Contemplation, How Silence Can Change the World. That one is taught by Carl McColman, who, among other books, wrote The Big Book of Christian Mysticism and Answering Contemplative Call. And he says, contemplation is the practice, mysticism is the theory. Ignite the spiritual passion of your with keys to understanding mysticism. The next one is Wake Up, What is the Deeper Call? That one is with Annika Komen. She's another mystic. I think you're going to notice a theme here, lots of mystics. Um, she's, she's, a lot of her teaching happens in the Fortune 500 companies where she goes and teaches meditation and mindfulness. And so she says, discern what is rooted in fear, what is rooted in love, listening to the guidance of the divine. Then we have something that maybe you have not even heard of called interplay. It's an active, creative way to unlock the wisdom of your body. And I should add body, heart, mind, soul. And it's being taught by Cassandra Sagan, a Maggid, a Jewish storyteller, teacher, preacher, holy clown. And so she does it's called incremental forms, and it's very participatory, and you go through different movements and storytelling and silence and song, and it's really a lot of fun. All of this is going to be fun, actually. And the last one is How to Have a Ridiculously Amazing Life with Edie Weinstein, an interfaith minister, a motivational speaker, and her topic is what is it like to live full out, no holds barred, with enthusiasm and inspired passion. So that'll all come in an email, and you can choose one of those. And we just are so appreciative of the 12 people who signed up for this particular webinar. We just want to give you things, and so we will. This is the first thing, and we'll be giving other things too. Okay, Rami.
Okay. So we had 12 people. We only have 5 people on.
I
So,
know, and we only got email from one who said for sure Babs said she couldn't be here. So
okay.
other people are probably arriving late. We know Betty's at the chiropractor, so that's actually 2 that we know.
Okay. All right. We were going to start with some questions from last time that we didn't get to. Betty has some, and
Judith.
um, Judith has some. So, Judith, you're here. Why don't we start with yours?
Okay. Well, my question is, I guess when I signed up for this course, I was really impressed with the original the video, the presentation that you did on being a holy rascal, and how it was about using humor to deal with confront a lot of these different stuck places in the world of religion, or maybe in the world, and I guess for myself, I've had to deal, and there's ways in which I've done that at throughout my life and ministry. I'm actually a deacon in the Episcopal Church, But sometimes I've been struggling lately, and I guess one of the areas where I run up against this is, I guess throughout my ministry, I've been dealing with issues where all the questions of theodicy is like, well, if God's good, why is all this stuff happening? And one of the issues in particular is the issue of clerical sexual abuse and misconduct. And I guess one of the things I'm interested in is finding some ability to you have an ability to bring humor of some degree, in one degree or another, in the whole process of dealing with this stuff. And I was hoping that this course would sort of help with that. I mean, given the promo. And I guess I think I'm on the same page with you about a lot of what you're talking about. I've appreciated, being exposed to some different sorts of texts and things about various, different topics that I was not familiar with. But sometimes it sort of felt like the whole thing is almost like dead serious, and
this is that okay. Let me
really interested in finding how this can help bring humor, and help me to become a holy rascal more so than I already am. That's the question.
Yeah, let me just say up front that other webinar, How to Be a Holy Rascal, that was a separate webinar. That wasn't a promo for this. These are two totally different things. One was apples and oranges. This one is, I hope not deadly, but this one is serious. Yeah, so if you were looking for what you say you're looking for, well, you're not going to get it. But let's take up the question. I mean, you raised three questions. One is theodicy. The other is the abuse of by clergy. And the third is, does humor help in any of this? So theodicy is a huge question. Why does a good God allow or do terrible things? Well, there's only three possible answers. One, you could always say there is no God, so that just ends the whole question. Two, you invent some, the opposite of God. So, Superman has to have Lex Luthor, or, Batman has to have the Joker. I mean, when you create a character who's all good, there is no drama, there is no anything without a character who's all bad, and they have to fight it out. So in Christianity, the all-good God is pitted against the all-evil Satan. And even though we know that God wins in the end, it's still incumbent upon Christians to take sides. So that's why you accept, Jesus. I'm talking about Protestantism primarily, but you accept Jesus into your life as your Lord and Savior, and that puts you in the, the army of God, and then you confront the army of Satan. And in Christianity, we always talk about Protestant stuff. We talk about spiritual warfare and all this kind of stuff. So the way you deal with theodicy in that context is you say it's not God, it's the devil. And that just raises more problems. Why does God allow the devil to do stuff? Because God is, Harold Kushner in his book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People, said that either God is all-powerful and evil, or God is not all-powerful and good. Those are the only two choices besides no God that he allows. And I mean, I don't accept either choice, but there's not a lot of wiggle room. The alternative is like Isaiah 45:7, where God says in the Bible, I create good, I create light, I create darkness, I create good, I create evil, I the Lord do all these things. And that's the theology we're proposing here, that God is reality, and reality includes horrible things. Not, and we'll get to this when we get to the why question, not because God wills it, but because it's inevitable. You can't have good without evil. You can't have up without down, right without left. All these things go together. So if you accept that premise, then, the yin yang, the Taoist point of view, then the question of why is there evil is no more relevant than the question why is there good. There's evil, because that's just the nature of reality. But if you want to have a God, if you believe in a God who is good, evil is your problem. There's a wonderful professor, Bart, B-A-R-T, Bart Ehrman, and he has a book called God's Problem. And very quickly, Ehrman is a major New Testament scholar. And he's written lots of books. And he started out as a fundamentalist, and then as he moved toward his doctorate, he began to lose his fundamentalist faith, but kept his belief in God, and he was a Christian. But it was this theodicy issue that drove him out of the church, but then ultimately he lost his faith. He just couldn't imagine a God worth having, anyway, that would allow evil to happen. Now, let me just take it one step further, if this is of interest to people, but in many circles, the answer to the question is, well, there's evil because God allows free will. Now, this means two things. One, evil is just stuff that people do. So because we have free will, or whatever, if you believe in that or not, but if we have free will, that has no impact on hurricanes and tsunamis and accidental fires and exploding in Texas that fertilizer plant. I mean, those aren't things that people did. Those are just things that happened. And we wouldn't call those evil. Evil has to be something that people do if we're going to talk about free will. And then the question would be, why do people do it? And then, or why does God allow people to do it? And the answer is, well, God allows us to have free will. The question is, which begs another question, why? What do we really need free will? And most people say, well, if I didn't have free will, I wouldn't be me. But you wouldn't know it. I mean, just imagine if you didn't have the capacity to rape, murder, plunder, cheat, lie, I mean, all those things that we do. What if you didn't have that capacity? I mean, you just didn't have it. No one has it. We're all born to be nice. Would anyone wander around going, God, I wish I could kill somebody? It would never occur to us. So I don't see why free will is such a good thing. Why well, you have to have free will. No, you don't. The reason you have to have free will theologically is because you freely have to choose God, or an affirmation of faith is irrelevant. So if you're forced to choose God, forced to love God, it says in Deuteronomy, Jews say this all the time, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. You're commanding love. How do you, God says, you have to love me, but I want you to do it freely. I mean, it's a catch-22. It doesn't work. So we imagine a God who demands love, and that creates us in such a way that we could say no to God. Therefore, when we say yes to God, God can take it.
You are no longer a presenter.
Well, that's nice to know. But just because you spend years and years in seminary doesn't make you a nice person. Now, I'm assuming this is true in other places, but I don't know for sure. When you go to when you go to rabbinical school in the Reform movement, they make you take a battery of tests first to see if you really are a psychopath. But the battery is so easy to beat that anybody can get through. I mean, they ask you questions like, do you hear voices? And of course, if you say yes, you might be able to squeeze by and say it's God, but this is the Reform movement, so I doubt that would wash. But, so you just say, no, I don't hear voices. Do you feel paranoid? No, I don't feel paranoid. You just lie on the test and you get through, and that's the only time they ever check on the quality of the people that they're admitting. So there, it's just, why, for goodness sake, why would anybody turn their lives over to someone else who somehow says they have magic status or spiritual status? I don't mind going to a teacher, If I don't know how to meditate, I go to a meditation teacher. If I want to learn how to chant, I go to a chant teacher. But I don't turn my life over to anybody. No, it just makes no sense to me. But that is how religion operates. Priests, rabbis, imams, I mean, they have status that they don't earn. It's simply status that's bestowed upon them with these titles. So it has nothing to do with God. I mean, except we're back to the free will issue again. And then the last thing about...
You're saying the way of Toto again. You're just doing from the Holy Rascal webinar.
Yeah, I think that's what you have to do.
Toto. You pull the curtain back, and it's somebody with a megaphone.
Yeah, that's how I think. That's what I think religion is, and doesn't mean it's bad because that's what it is. And then humor is. I don't think there's anything humorous at all about clergy, abuse by clergy. But I think that humor is the way we free ourselves from the clutches of religion. That when you realize what the standard religious positions are, that there's a God somewhere. Now, you may believe this, and I don't mean to discount anyone's beliefs, but just personally, I cannot imagine a God somewhere, I don't even know where that somewhere would be, who chooses the Jewish people rather than any other people, who has a special affinity for the land of Israel as opposed to New Jersey, who cares about all the minutia of the Jewish tradition that I'm supposed to care about because God says I should care about it. I just don't get that God. I don't get a God who so loves humanity that he's willing to torture his son. If you're a Christian, and I was learning the other day from this Christian guy who was teaching that Jesus is always on the cross, that every time a person sins, Jesus is tortured. Now that's a really sadistic God who takes his kid and hangs him there for all eternity and just lets him be tortured. There's something wrong with religion, and what's wrong with religion is it's a human invention. And so what's wrong with us is wrong with our faith traditions. We've simply projected the madness that is the human being onto God and then declared it holy. And I think that's crazy. Now, yes, I'm dead serious. There's nothing funny about any of the stuff I'm saying. But, Shauna says, I'm afraid I was hardwired to question authority. I don't know if that's true. I mean, I know what you're saying about yourself. I don't know if people are hardwired. We may be hardwired to go along. We may be hardwired to just, to follow the leader. We have to be, I would suggest that we have to be trained to question authority. We have to be in a social network or a community that values questioning. But no, I'm just thinking, my semester ends tomorrow at Middle Tennessee State. I'm going to go to Bible class, and these are kids who most of them do not question authority. The Bible is their authority, and whatever it says is reality, literally reality. Now, what it says is always filtered through what they were taught it says, but they don't question it. They can't question it. I mean, that's my whole semester was trying to question it. So anyway, I went on way longer than I thought, but it's really important questions. So you want to come back at all, Judith, or move on?
I guess I would just like to come back very briefly in terms of Christian theology. My sense is that Jesus, in the whole, the Trinitarian concept, and Jesus on the cross is God experiencing the suffering of the world, that it's not about the Father torturing the Son, that it's about God coming within our midst and being willing to suffer some of the reality of what we might call evil in the world, and still triumphantly love the world.
Yeah, much better than what this guy was saying to me yesterday.
So anyway, I would just like to offer that as a
Yeah, your
another
approach
way
is
of
much better. But
thinking
so
about.
it's yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to talk over you. But it's so interesting that I'm assuming you're a layperson. Is that true?
I'm a deacon. I'm
Oh,
the
okay.
Reverend Judith Ain. Yeah, so
Oh,
I'm
okay. All
ordained.
right.
Yeah,
So
I have a
not exactly.
seminary
It's
training, so I know
uh,
that. I've been through those tests that you talk about.
yeah. Okay. So this guy was a pastor, and but there's so many different kinds of Christianity. But I like yours much better than what this guy was telling me. But I've heard it many times from different. My unfortunately, the Christianity to which I am exposed, here in Tennessee, is not the most enlightened kind of Christianity. You want to go on to Becky's
Betty.
Betty's
So,
question?
Betty, I'll just try to quickly summarize a few of her questions. She said, and this is related for people who weren't on here earlier, just to last week's webinar. She said, when someone died, she was there in the room and she saw light coming out of their body. She said she herself has had a near-death experience. And then she said she got a message about life from her father, who, after he had died, somehow communicated with her. He was a Hasid, and he said, as you live, you create your name. That was the message she got. So those were things she wanted to bring up, and say, like, well, where does that all fit in with what you were talking about?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, those are interesting questions. I mean, let's take the middle one first about near-death experience. There's no problem. The theology that we're exploring here, the perennial philosophy, perennial wisdom, is that ocean wave analogy, and that when we die, we go back to being who we really are, in essence, which is the divine. The near-death experience should simply be the way we experience going back. So not everyone, but most people go through that tunnel and they approach the light. And the theory here is that if you finish death, if you didn't come back, you'd go into the light, you'd become the light. So, in Sufism, it's nur ala nur, light from light. And we're expression of the light, and then we go back to the light. So near-death experience, in that sense, is not problematic. Today, what was I reading? Some magazine, now I can't remember. But there's a lot of near-death books that have come out recently. The one about that neurosurgeon who found himself flying on the back of a giant butterfly with a beautiful woman. That was his near-death experience. But he doesn't say it was near-death. He says that's what heaven is. I don't know if we each get to have our own insect and our own partner to fly with, but that's his thing, is that he's flying on a butterfly. And that's my problem with that is if we're going to say that the ego is eternal, I mean, I just can't fathom that. But if you want to stick with that, well, flying on the back of a butterfly or spending eternity in hell or spending eternity in heaven, I mean, those are all variations on a theme. But near death to me, and I'm not an expert, but I've read, a lot about it, and I've been in touch a long time ago with Dr. Kenneth Ring, who was a major near-death scholar from the University of Connecticut. And he had this approach that what we're talking about is moving from egoic consciousness to non-egoic consciousness, from a sense of a separate me to the light where the separate me dissolves. To see light coming out of a person, I think that's the way, if you're attuned enough, that's probably the way we experience it. People see auras, they see all kinds of things. I don't know if there's a problem theologically with that. But what was the last part?
A message that she got from her father, and it was after he had died.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what the message means, and what she means by she got a message. Now, again, the position I'm sharing is just my thinking. I could be totally wrong. I mean, my neighbors are convinced I'm going to spend eternity in hell. So this may be simply my way of not thinking about it. But I use the analogy of the knots in the rope. I think we've talked about this, where you tie a knot in the rope, and the difference between the two of them is simply a shape and not essence. and you put a second knot in the rope, and so one knot is her dad and one knot is Betty, and when you untie dad's knot, the rope hasn't changed, the connection isn't lost. If there is a way to tap into the energy that was her dad, she may filter it through her own experience, come up with hear this message. I would never argue against it. I don't, it's as viable experience as any other experience. The question that I would have is, so what does it mean, and what are you doing with that? But if we're just talking theoretically, and someone is arguing that the ego survives, I really just can't accept it. I mean, that's not my experience in meditation. It doesn't work for me intellectually, it doesn't work for me theologically, and it doesn't work for me experientially. But that's just me. So are we ready to move on then?
I think so.
Okay, and let's take a look at the two questions we're trying to cover in the next half hour. Luckily, it'll be easy to do. So how should I live? Given the fact that we're all interconnected, what really matters? And I want to suggest that the golden rule is what matters. Now, the golden rule is not complete in and of itself. It's a direction. I think of it as a compass rather than a map. A map is like the 613 things to do in Judaism, 613 commands. It's a map. You put your foot here, and then you put your foot there, and you put your foot there, and you have to do these things, and we tell you exactly how to do them. A compass just sets you in the right direction. And that's what I think the golden rule does. So what you're looking at are golden rule statements from a variety of traditions. The oldest one is the second one down, Confucius. He seems to have been the first person to come up with this. Do not do to others what you would not want done to yourself. Sorry, there's a typo there. Hillel in the Jewish tradition we don't have these numbered, but the third up from the bottom. What is hateful to you, do not do to another. So there's the negative way of putting the golden rule, and then there's the positive way, which is what we've got in Matthew 7:1 on the top of the page. All things whatsoever you would that others do to you, do to them also. Then we could argue this. Are they really different? Are they just nuanced differences? Some people will say, well, everything that I want, I should do to somebody else. That's an imposition of my desires onto someone else. Can I be certain the other person would like that done to them? Maybe we're better just looking at the negative. We probably agree that we don't want to be lied to, but we may not all agree that we'd like to be stuffed with hot fudge sundaes. The last part, that's something I would like done unto me, but you may not want that done unto you. So we can have that argument. I'd rather skip that argument. I think that what we're looking at here is a compass, and that the compass just sets us in the right direction. And the right direction is twofold. One, it's the realization that you and I are really part of the same system. I really think that what the golden rule is saying, or let's say beneath the golden rule, is an existential reality. That if I hurt you, I hurt myself. Because we're interconnected without a doubt, I guess. And it doesn't have to be us. I mean, you could look at the rainforest. My lungs need oxygen, but don't produce oxygen. My body produces methane. I know people said that, but my body produces methane. But I need oxygen. So the oxygen comes from trees and other greenery through photosynthesis. So when I go about destroying the rainforest in the Amazon, I'm actually I'm suffocating myself. And eventually we're going to end up without enough oxygen, and then we're all going to die from suffocation. So it's in my best interest not to destroy the rainforest. I think that's true with every issue. Whatever I do to the world I'm doing to myself. So if I'm hateful to you, I'm hurting myself ultimately. Doesn't mean that if I'm hateful to you, you're going to turn around and be hateful to me back. That may or may not happen. But it does mean that if I'm putting hate out into the world becomes more hateful, and it's going to make it more difficult for me to to function well in the world. So I don't see this as all that problematic. I mean, I'm working on a book on the golden rule, and I get into all kinds of subtleties. But I think it's just the nature of writing a book as opposed to really, it's the nature of just parsing these things to death as opposed to seeing them as a compass and being able to use them to your advantage. So let's move beyond the golden rule. Take a look at another couple things. So this is Ecclesiastes. And he says, I yielded to every desire my eyes made known to me. I denied myself nothing. No pleasure was taboo. And in truth, my heart rejoiced in it all. I love that line in Ecclesiastes because the guy is honest. I did all this stuff, and it's wine and sex and food and gardens and music. And he just indulged in everything to see if any of it would ultimately satisfy him. And he's honest, and he says, no, it didn't satisfy me, but it was fun. I got to admit, it was fun. But it didn't solve his problem. And his problem was, how do you live in a world of constant change where there is no permanence? And ultimately, he says, I will show you. So I concluded, he says, that there is nothing better for you than to find joy in what you're given to do. For doing is your lot, and none can see what the future holds. So he adds a few things to that. So in addition to joy, so you're going to have work that makes you happy, but then simply to eat and drink and find pleasure in your daily tasks. This is the life way you're given. Take pleasure in whatever you receive, no matter how much or how little. Accept what is and learn to enjoy it. This is the gift reality offers. In this way, you will not fall prey to anxiety, for you will be filled with joy. I don't know about the joy part, but if we're looking at how we should live, he's talking about living with moderation. You eat and drink, in moderation, because he tried the excess, and you find pleasure in your daily tasks. Now, you could understand that to mean, like the Zen Buddha saying, how wonderful, how marvelous, I chop wood, I carry water. Daily routines that you just have to do, and you can find joy in them. But I think he's also talking about work. Outside self, not just working on myself, but working in service to others, either through a job or through raising children or whatever it may be. That in addition to food and drink, and later on he talks about clothes and being cleaning or being bathed, work is really important. To have a job or some tasks that you do that bring joy to your life. I think those things are important. And then he adds another thing, which is friendship. So it's food, drink, work, and friendship. Those are the things he keeps coming back to. And I find that very helpful. It's very simple. It's not complicated. It's also very, it focuses on the individual, not society, though you could switch it and say, then everyone should have enough food and clothing and drink, and everyone should have a job that brings them joy, and everyone should live in a community that cultivates friendship. But he's not the only one who says this. So take a look at St. Augustine. Without a friend, nothing in the world seems friendly. Friendship should not be bounded by narrow limits, for it embraces all to whom we owe affection and love, though it is inclined more eagerly toward some and more hesitantly toward others. It, however, extends even to enemies, for whom we are also commanded to pray. Thus, there is no one in the human race to whom we do not owe love, even if not out of mutual love, at least on account of our sharing in a common nature. So this last line, sharing in a common nature, that could lead us to have compassion for one another, but even more, sharing in a common reality, like I was saying earlier, that we're all part of the same singularity and the same biosystem, the same, we're all part of a single body. And once you realize that, taking care of myself means taking care of others. There's a built-in mutuality to it. But I love the beginning. Without a friend, nothing in the world seems friendly. So, they're just going to go on like this, and there's more texts, and I think we've sent them. This is the one about friendship with from Ecclesiastes, and this is, Bridget of Kildare, a person without a soul friend is like a body without a head. I mean, everyone recognizes the power of friendship. So I'm going to move to, oops, that's not what I want to do next. From Marcus Aurelius, never value anything as profitable to yourself, which shall compel you to break your promise, to lose your self-respect, to hate any person, to suspect, to curse, to act a hypocrite, to desire anything which needs walls and curtains. I love that one. You have to hide, something's wrong. For the person who has preferred to everything intelligence and spirit and the worship of its excellence, acts no tragic part, does not groan, will not need either solitude or much company, and what is chief of all, will live without either pursuing or flying from death. I'm not a huge Marcus Aurelius fan, but I love the Stoics, and he's part of that tradition. It isn't rocket science about how we should live. It takes tremendous amount of study to figure out why we don't live that way, but it's not rocket science. So let me stop just for a second. I'm going to watch the clock here because the last one goes very quickly. But what's your response to these?
Everybody's on mute, but maybe somebody can unmute themselves and have a response.
Let me ask you, Kathy, did you say mute the background because you're hearing something?
Yeah, I was hearing some background kind of another conversation going on.
Oh, okay. All right. You know what? I think that's me. That's my house. Hold on a sec.
So, this would be a good time to open the discussion while Rami's going to mute his own background noise.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know whether I had been muted because I didn't know how to unmute myself.
Yeah, I think that was my house. I closed the door, opened again. So anyone want to just comment on these, or we'll move on? And we move on. TS says he's getting a lot of echo. Really? Yes. I don't know what to do with that. Sorry.
I don't know what to do about it either, TS. I'm sorry. Maybe are you on a cell phone?
No.
Okay. That's the only thing I know to change.
You might want to help and call back in if that works. I don't know if you can do that on this. All right. Well, we'll just have to deal with reality as it presents itself. When the microphone and speakers are too close, there will be an echo. Well, my speaker is my computer, so I don't think that's the problem. Anyway, we'll just have to move on. So
I don't hear an echo coming across on my line, just to give you feedback.
Okay.
And neither do I.
Neither.
All right, then we all have to chip in and buy TS a new computer. That's what we need. So the last question is why? And I when I was putting this together, and this is based on a book that's coming out, when I was putting this together, I thought about just the 4 existential questions. Who am I? Where do they come from? Where am I going? And how should I live? And not put why in there. But everyone always asks the question why. So I felt we had to deal with it. The reason I hesitate to bring it up is because there's just a gazillion answers, and none of them are necessarily helpful. We can ask why forever. I mean, it's like, I don't know if any of you are therapists, but if you've ever been in therapy or been trained to be a counselor, the 2 best questions a counselor has is how you feel about that and why. And that will keep you talking for another hour, and then you never finish. And then you have to come back the next week, and you can just spend your life trying to figure out why things are the way they are. And certainly religions have their answers. There's no question about that. I mean, why is there evil? Well, you can go back to if you're a Jew or a Christian, you can go back to the Garden of Eden story. If we're talking about Hinduism, just because we're ignorant of our true nature, and we always have these answers. But what I did was, when I was in the last chapter of the book this way, I took as my starting point a modern Hebrew saying. It's not a proverb, it's just a saying. It's a snarky thing that Israelis, I don't know if they still say this, but they used to say this. The word for why in Hebrew is lama, L-A-M-A. And if someone would say, lama, why? The snarky response is kacha, which is K-A-K-H-A. And it means because. Now, you could simply say that the way a parent might say, why do I have to do this? And the kid says, asking, because I said so, right? I mean, that's that. But that's not what it means. It's closer, I think, at least the way we're going to be using it, it's closer to the Buddhist notion of just so. That things are the way they are because they can't be anything else at the moment. Things are just so. And that's what I really want to look at, this notion of just so. So it's not like I'm saying here, because I said so. And it's not because God wills it if we're going to take God as a self-conscious being outside of creation. If you understand God as reality itself, then yeah, I could say God wills it because reality is doing it. So reality is at least in quotes, willing it. So this is here's my last slide. And I want to go through this, and this is how I answer the question for myself. So why? Because, and I'm going to read this all through, and then we're going to go back. So because if this moment could be other than it is, it would be. Because if you could be other than you are at this moment, you would be. Because given what is at this moment, what happens must happen. Because you aren't free to change what is, only what's next. Because this isn't the best of all possible worlds. It's the only possible world. Lama, kacha, just so. So let me go back and then unpack this a little bit, and then we'll talk about it. So I believe that this moment is the way it is because it can't be other than it is. Now, is that fatalism? Not exactly. Predestination, predetermination? Not exactly. Fatalism, predetermination, predestination all assume that our lives were scripted from before we were born. And I know people like that. My sister believes that. That she came into the world with a script to follow, and no matter what she does, what's happening to her now was fated from the moment she came into the universe. I don't buy that. My understanding is that this moment is the aggregate expression of all moments that have gone before it for the last 13.8 billion years. And nothing else could happen at this moment than what is happening at this moment, because of all the variables that are in place, of all the conditions, that are in place. So if this moment could be other than it is, it would be other than it is, but then it would still be what it is. It would still not have any choice. The present is simply the inevitable expression of all the past moments. The second one is because if you could be other than you are at this moment, you would be. It's the same idea. Who I am at this very moment is the expression of who I was in all the moments for the last 62 years and all the conditions that are present right now. The questions that are being asked, what we're doing at the moment. It's not that I can stop and be someone different because I didn't set out to be anybody at all. It's just what's unfolding in the moment. Because given what is at this moment, what happens must happen. So, if someone says, well, I was in a car accident. Why did that happen? Well, it happened because there were two automobiles going at a certain speed in a certain way with certain drivers. Maybe one is drunk, maybe both, all the variables that are involved in that situation. That's why you had an auto accident. Not because God planned it, not because the devil's doing it, not because someone set it up for you, before you were born that this was going to happen to you. It's just the inevitable nature of the conditions on the ground, or if we're talking about ourselves, the conditions in our physiology or the conditions in our psychology. And there's the next one, we can't change any of that in this moment. I think you can change the next moment. So, if I'm arguing with somebody and we storm off the end of the argument, and then I see the person the next day, that next encounter is going to carry some of the weight of the prior encounter, but my reaction to the next encounter doesn't have to mimic or imitate what I did in the prior encounter. So I don't, if I was angry before and the other person is still angry with me now, that doesn't mean I have to be angry. Now, if they start out angry and it's my conditioning that I just respond to anger, then yeah, we're right back into it. But I think that people do have the capacity to break habits. And I'm going to talk about a way to do that shortly. So that it's not that we are robots. It's only that we don't control the conditions in which we find ourselves. We have to work with what we find, with what we've got. And then I want to come back to the last one in a second, but let's just take a look at some of the comments that are coming up in the chat list here. So Lindsay's saying radical acceptance is what psychology calls it. Yeah. And it's about not being in control, right? Accepting the fact that you are not in control. Life lessons are mandatory. The learning is optional. I'm not exactly sure, Shauna, what you mean by life lessons. Are these planned for me? Another dimension. Go ahead.
Well, I think my theology is very different than yours. First of all, I think, but I'm not sure. I think that our eternal soul knows what it is that we need in order to become more united with God. And so we choose in eternity, we choose what lessons we need to learn to get there. And so we continue to experience those lessons until we learn them. And if we don't learn them in this lifetime, then we come back another lifetime until we do.
Right.
Maybe that's a simplistic way.
That is definitely not my theology, but what you're saying makes sense. I understand what you're saying. But I always have a question, so if you don't mind my asking.
Of course.
If your eternal soul knows this already, why does it bother even incarnating? Because my body's going to die, so what difference does it make if this flesh goes through these hoops? If I'm already, before I was born, I'm already enlightened, basically.
No, and I don't know that I have all the answers, but my current belief system is that the veil of all knowledge is lifted in eternity. Right now, there's a veil that we have, that we don't see it all. But our eternal soul knows the experiences that we need to have in order to grow more godlike or grow in God.
Right.
And
but does the soul need to grow, or does the soul needs to grow?
Right.
Okay.
And the best way to do that happens to be within this particular mortality, in this particular time, in this particular solar system.
Mm.
And I don't know. It's what I believe at this point in time.
Yeah. You're being clear about it. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So the soul doesn't know. That's why it all has to. The soul knows what it needs, but it doesn't. It made sense a second ago. Like if I know I need to learn algebra, it doesn't mean I already know algebra. It just means I have to take algebra. so the soul can know that I need to learn whatever the equivalent of algebra would be. And the way to do it is to have these experiences. And then if I learn from them, of course, why wouldn't I learn from them? If the soul knows I need them, and the soul is me, right?
Are you kidding? Why wouldn't I? I wish I. Why? It's really hard. Most of soul lessons are really hard. It's not like algebra. You know.
Well, it depends. Hey, algebra was hard for me.
Well, it was hard for me too, but I chose. I don't think algebra has any basis in the eternal.
Okay.
But so
so maybe my example is not the best, but the soul is in my body, right?
I don't know. I guess
Okay.
this
I'm
goes
just trying to figure out why the soul wouldn't learn, since it knows it needs to learn.
because there is a veil in our mortal existence. The conscious knowledge of what we need to learn isn't always conscious, and usually, at least for me, it's hindsight is much clearer than foresight, and beginning to recognize when I'm facing another life lesson is, in my thought, spiritual growth. You know, being able to be conscious of the spiritual lessons in the moment rather than as you look back. I don't know.
So just, and I won't go on with this, but I just, I love this kind of stuff. So when you die, the soul doesn't die.
Oh no. Mm-mm.
Right. So yeah, I'm hearing that echo now too.
I am not. When I say I am not this body is
right.
just a vessel for this particular set of experiences that I've chosen to have in this particular incarnation.
So there's a part of you that knows what you need, that knows you're incarnated to get that, but still can't get it.
Well, I'm working on it.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. Looks like we're all getting echoes. So let's just talk about the how question. How do we cultivate? If we're all in this together, and I don't believe in an eternal soul. I believe that it's just the divine. That the only eternal thing is God itself. But this probably would work in other theologies as well. So I believe that we're all interconnected. And so how do we practice this interconnectedness? And I'm just going to put a word in for metta practice, METTA. And I want to do it, I want to teach it to you the way I do it, as opposed to the way, if you look it up on Google, if you're not familiar with it, or you read it in Buddhist books, it's a little bit different. In Buddhist settings, what metta is, metta means compassion, and you're sending blessings to other people. And, I have lots of people who say this is, nonsense. How can what I do here affect what happens over there? But if I believe it's all interconnected, it's like dropping a pebble in a pool of water and the ripples go, and it does affect what happens elsewhere. So I'm not going to argue the does it work question. I think it works. I think my experience suggests it works, and all I would say is test it for yourself if you haven't done it before. But in the Buddhist frame of this, you're sending happiness to the other person, peacefulness to the other person. The way I do it, it's a little bit different. So in both systems, you imagine, and there's a lot more to it than this, and you can read about it, but you start with yourself, and you imagine yourself. Now, what I do is usually imagine myself at 8 years old, in my 20s, midlife, where I am now, old age, on my deathbed, and in each imagining, I offer the following series of blessings. So I'm seeing myself, because I start with myself, and I say, may you be free from fear. May you be free from compulsion. May you be blessed with peace. May you be blessed with love. So no, got it backwards. I'm sorry. May you be free from fear. May you be free from compulsion. May you be blessed with love. May you be blessed with peace. When there is no fear, there's love. When there is no compulsion, there's peace. So when you do this for yourself, I start when I'm a little kid. This is not the Buddhist way of doing it, because I carry around that 8-year-old me. You know, you may be a 13-year-old you or whatever, but you can play with this any way you want. But there's parts of my psyche that are still 8 years old, and I want to free that person. And then I go through the different stages of my life, and then I even go beyond until I get to old age, and then I get to my deathbed, and I imagine myself on my deathbed, so that even there, I'm sort of priming myself so that when I'm preparing to die, this is the assumption that I'm making, that I will have practiced this enough that I can free myself from fear, free myself from compulsion, and then be blessed with love and blessed with peace in those last moments. Then you take someone that you love and you do it for them, and then you take someone with whom you're neutral and you do it with them, and then you take someone with whom you're struggling and you do it with them. The reason I like this practice is twofold. One, it works. But two, it reminds me that we are all frightened and locked into habits. And if you remember, Fire Sign Theater has an album out a long time ago in the 70s, maybe. We're all bozos on this bus. I think that's true. We're all bozos on this bus. We're all doing the best we can with the madness that we confront. And if you believe that we chose this reality because we had to learn these lessons, then all the more we should have compassion on ourselves and others when things are so bad. We chose them to be that way because we had to learn these things. So it's just, I think it's a very humbling but also hopeful way of living, because I just feel compassion when I know you're stuck. I mean, I used to do this with my father when I was trying to deal with the fact that our relationship was very, very poor, but I couldn't avoid it. It's a whole backstory, which we don't have time for, but I started doing this metta practice, visualizing him, especially when I had to talk to him on the phone. And it didn't take very long before I realized he is like everyone else, myself included. He's driven by fear, he's driven by compulsion. And then I had such compassion for him as soon as I realized that. Now you may think, well, duh, but it was an aha for me. So I love this practice. Reb Zalman, Shachter Shalomi, my rabbi, he does this. I don't know what words he uses, but he does this in a beautiful way. He has what I would call a metta box. So metta is the Sanskrit word for compassion, or is it Sanskrit or Pali? Now I'm not sure, but it's the word for compassion. And his box is like a little tin recipe box. And in the recipe box, he has the month cards, January, February, March, April. And in each month section, he puts photographs of students and family and loved ones whose birthdays fall in those months. So we're just coming to the beginning of May. So if he's still doing it, what he taught me was, so the beginning of May, you're going to pull out May 1st, you pull out your May cards, and he has a little, not a pedestal, little tripod kind of thing. And he places the card on the tripod and he looks at that person and he feels a connection to that person. And then he says, so the way I do it, I would then say, may you be free from fear. May you be free from compulsion. May you be blessed with love. May you be blessed with peace. And then he'll take the next person. And that, I just had my birthday on Friday. I know, because he's told me that, he does this for me in April. I just think it's a beautiful practice. And it, whether or not you believe it impacts the other person, I guarantee it impacts you. And, maybe then you'll pick up the phone and call the other person if you want to get something more intimate than just the metta practice. But this is a way, how should we live? This is a practice about how we should live. And if you do metta, well, I'm not saying every day, but if you do metta on a regular basis, it just frees us, the doer, of fear and compulsion, and opens the heart wider and wider and wider to a radical acceptance, as Lindsay said, of who the other person is. So that's one way of addressing Laurie's question of how. How do you do this? How do you cultivate radical acceptance? Well, there's a whole psychology about that, but just this, I think, would be so helpful to people if they practiced it regularly. I think it's Sharon Salzberg who's written a lot about metta practice in a Buddhist frame. I'm not sure who else, but it's a great practice. So we are just about out of time. So Wendy said, oh, yes, metta means compassion. Kathy's just filling us in here on that. Let's take a couple minutes if we can and just see if there's other questions, closing questions, and then we'll wrap it up.
Rami, this is Bill.
There you go.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you for all your work on the webinar. The metta practice sounds beautiful, and I want to try that. Has Reb Zellman written in more detail about how he does that?
No, this I learned from him privately. So so my answer is I don't know. I don't know if he's written about it. But this is just something he showed me in the basement of Reb Zalman's house. He's got multiple rooms, and one of them is his little meditation chamber. And in the meditation chamber is where he does his prayers, and he's got a metta box. So it's just something he was showing me.
It sounds like a beautiful and powerful practice, and Barbara and I will.
I think it really is. You can read a little bit more about it. Actually, I wrote about it. I just remembered. In my book, Loving Kindness, I think there's a whole section on metta.
All right. Well, thank you again for all your work on this. It's been a really great experience.
Are you by yourself?
Barbara is here with me.
Hi, Barbara.
Of course. When have you seen us either one alone?
No, I've never seen either one of you alone. And since your camera's not on, I'm assuming Barbara's in her pajamas again.
You are correct.
Pajama party.
Okay. Oh, so Lindsay says she read about it in my book. She's thinking about doing it. Well, stop thinking about it. Just do it. Well, okay. It looks like there's nothing pressing here at the moment. So I want to thank everybody for trying this with us. This is a learning process. Hopefully you got something out of it, even if it wasn't what you expected, especially if you're coming off of How to Be a Holy Rascal and thought we were doing that. But I hopefully you got some interesting information and another way of looking at things. And I just again thank you very much, because it was a lot of fun for me, and this is my first time of doing a series. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, and I'd like to. Am I being speaking? Hearing her. Anyway, this is Judith. And I really appreciated the presentation today. And I want to make a suggestion that you might think about doing a Holy Rascal boot camp of some sort.
So, we were talking about that. What do you think that is?
Well, I might be interested in. I'm not sure exactly what it would look like. I mean, I would imagine that it could. Be something. It would have to be interactive, and maybe people supporting one another in looking about and thinking about the situations that they're dealing with, probably in where they're feeling stuck. To be able to
I'm looking at
roll through it and find that somehow the humor that can free them. Yeah.
So it looks like you hit a little nerve there. A couple of people, Lindsay and Laurie, have both said, where do we sign up? So I would be more than happy. I don't think I would do it on a webinar, though. That sounds like
It might be a different form, but
I think that's something we would do for a weekend. But you know what? If anyone else thinks that's an interesting idea, why don't you send us email, and Kathy and Wendy and I can knock it around and see if we can come up with something, and we can do it in Portlandia. We should think about that. That would be fun. I'm interested in playing around with that. Is anyone familiar with Bernie Glassman's The Order of Disorder? Bernie Glassman is a Zen master, and he teamed up with a clown, a European-style clown, not the Bigfoot clown face clowns in circus, but the European-style clown. And the guy's name was Mr. Yoo-Hoo, and they created the Order of Disorder, and it was clown training. And they would go around. They started a group called Clowns Without Borders, and they would go to some very, very sad places and bring their clown stuff to kids. It was really quite interesting. But I would absolutely be open to that. Holy Rascal Boot Camp. It's interesting. All right. Well, I will let you all go with a heartfelt thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you.
You also, and happy birthday.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
I'm going to turn the recording off. I guess I can't. I guess one of us has to end the